Okay, let's see how many people we got coming into the chat, into the room, and all that. Actually, oh, hold on a second. I forgot to even announce that I'm going live. My bad, guys. Give me 1 second here. If anyone's here, if you could put into the chat, just to make sure that you can hear me and all that. Sweet. Okay, cool, cool. All right, let's just wait for some more people to come in. If not, we'll jump into it anyways, just because this is a very exciting stream, in my opinion. 1 second here, guys. Cool. Hey, Luciano, sweet, awesome. All right, cool, cool. Okay, honestly, I'm probably just gonna tweet it out and post it after, because it's not so much about getting a lot of people into the stream so much as about the information itself. So please forgive me if I don't look at the chat as often as I normally do, just because there's so much to delve into here. So first and foremost, I've actually been super excited for this stream, guys, because I've been waiting probably 2 weeks at this point to do this. I've had this planned for a handful of days now, and just because of the sake of timing, whether it's content creation, editing, or me having that food poisoning and all that, I actually had hoped to do this, believe it or not, Sunday or Monday. But anyways, let me see. Temperature. SCP, I'll get to you in a little bit, my friend. I apologize, but I'm going to jump into this. So, first off, this is probably one of the most exciting things that I think we're able to connect back to, not just the extraterrestrial phenomenon, but understanding who we are. Now, of course, the title is Analyzing the Hidden Projector Room in Romania, SPHINX, the Akashic Structures, and Greys Are Human-ish. And I say ish because it gets a little bit complicated, but this is going to be a fun stream. So, let's, give me 1 second, guys. Let me just get myself comfortable. Okay, so we see here, anciently.net, the projection room, the greatest and also the strangest discovery of the Pentagon. In late 2002, the Pentagon, using satellites with ground-penetrating radar, would discover a large spherical shape cavern with a tunnel leading up to it in the Bucegi mountains of Romania. Now, normally they would look past something like this and not think much of it, but recently they had made a similar discovery in the underground of Baghdad, Iraq, which allegedly has been the real justification for the Iraq war that very few people even really knew about. Of course, the surface level, ideology that people subscribe to now is, of course, oh, they went for the oil. Yes, but of course, at the same time, this could have been a multi-pronged operation. It doesn't, I don't see what the problem would be if the vast majority of individuals on the inside thought they were going for the oil, and then you had maybe individuals that you could count only on your hand in terms of how many that knew the real reason. So we see here, the only difference, the one in the Bucegi Mountains was much larger, and the mountains had a sphinx nearby. Yes, a sphinx, just like the one by the Giza pyramids, but it gets even better, guys. So the US would work with Romania, and they would both investigate the anomalies, and what they would find would change the course of history as we know it, okay? So as the teams approached the entrance on the side of the Bucegi Mountains, something would activate. It was a large force field blocking the entrance. Shortly after, one of the U.S. officials would get a call. The one in Baghdad, the force field in Baghdad, activated as well. Now, let me just say here, guys, for the record, that what we're seeing here is just a quick, brief summary before we get into the real expose of it all. So, what we'll find here is that, so when one activated, so did the others. Initially, 3 soldiers would try to walk through the force field, but they would die of a heart attack instantly. So, the officials would have to take a different approach in order to deactivate the force field. You had to reach a higher state of consciousness. Give me 1 second, guys. I just want to make my face a little bit smaller here. Here we go. Okay, so this is where the Sphinx is located. To this day, allegedly, it's still there. Now, the Sphinx here, with respects to, 1 second, the geography of it, is allegedly above this projection room. But let's get into this right over here, the expose. The secret of secrets, the Bucegi Mountain secrets. All right, so we'll see here a summary of the discovery in 2003. There are 4 primary tunnels and further subtunnels that lead to deeper and bigger places, which you will have heard of, but with different names. Now, for those of you, by the way, that may not be familiar with what this projection room is, we will get to that, I promise. In these tunnels, you will find rooms, huge rooms with huge tables and stone chairs for people much, much taller than us. There's a few different angles to be taken here, folks. The projection room contains all of our history and can be replayed visually. A table where you can perform holographic experiments with DNA, mix and match anything you wish, and see what the results would be. These rooms were created 50,000 years ago, and each is connected to each other, protected by an energy source which activates all as one when it's activated. The locations are near the Sphinx in Egypt, Baghdad, Mount Kailash in Tibet, and the Bucegi Mountains in Romania. The inner tunnels lead to a secret world under the Gobi Plateau in Mongolia and to Antarctica. This connects to World War II and the German Tibet expedition, Romania being fast-tracked into NATO, Hollow Earth, the Eye Above the Pyramid, and more. Now, this is what's interesting. Since the declassification of the new ground-penetrating radar 2 years ago, the most staggering data has emerged of complex and labyrinthine underground systems in various parts of the world. At places like Guatemala in the South Americas, tunnels have been mapped under the Mayan pyramid complex at Tikal, which extend a full 800 kilometers to the opposite side of the country. Investigators remarked it was possible to understand how 500,000 Mayan Indians escaped the decimation of their culture. Okay, now that's kind of, giving a general broad overview of what's happening here. So, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate the comments, guys. So let's keep going. What happened in Romania? Okay, this is essentially the expose of what went down. Now, before we get into that, I do want to show you folks one quick image over here. Okay. So, essentially, when you enter this projection room, I believe this is also the image that is the thumbnail of this stream. When you enter this projection room, there's so much here to cover. It's almost super exciting. What you have are stone holographic projection tablets and tables on either side. This is the entrance to the room over here. Okay. What you then have is a podium with a sort of cylindrical stand and some steps to go onto it, and we see here a transparent half cylinder with amplification devices of the energy of thought. Now, we see here there are on either side 2 what seem to be, I don't want to say this is for certain, I'm just going to call them Tesla coils, something of the sort that seem to resemble some type of energy mechanism, if you want to call it. What you then have is a projection dome, which has the holographic sequences from human history, and a monoatomic gold chest. I don't know what the gold chest would be for. Maybe those in the audience would want to help me out here. But ultimately, this projection dome, essentially, what it does is that if you were to put the helmet on of this particular, within this room, there are certain helmets that are situated all around the room. Helmets, by the way, much larger than that of the size of our heads these days, which, again, to be honest with you, I can't help but think of the film Prometheus, when they go into a room just like this, inside of the craft that crashed in that bioweapons area from the film Prometheus. Anyways, once you put the helmet on, you then enter the astral realm, allegedly. The astral realm, again, there's the ethereal realm, the astral realm, different densities, and I'm not pretending to know or be an expert on any of it, but allegedly, this particular aspect of the astral realm would allow for you to basically see every single event using your mind. Just think of an event, think of the date relative to the planet, and you can then view in real time with that helmet on what happened in that exact place in that exact time. Basically, a much, much more advanced version by a long shot of the chronovisor, because the chronovisor allegedly, I'm sure it's been improved by now, but the chronovisor, you got to point it in a certain direction or a certain place. Like, for example, if I wanted to see what happened in, I don't know, Israel, 2,000 years ago. If I had a chronovisor, I would have to go fly to Israel to that location that I would want, allegedly, right? Whereas with this here, you put that helmet on, even though the helmet's way too big for you, somehow it still gets activated. You think of what you want to see, where, when, how, the whole thing, boom, you see it. Now, it gets even better than that. What we'll find here is that there are 3 doorways, okay? The first doorway heads to Tibet. The second doorway heads to Inner Earth, and the third doorway heads to Egypt. Now, what's interesting is that there's been some different conflictual allegations about this. Some say there's more than 3 doorways. Some say there's been an improved, a doorway that's been added by modern day humans, like, you know, the United States government and all of that. And that fourth doorway takes you to the moon, just because of how often and how frequent these secret space program individuals frequent the bases on the moon and things like this. Now, what we'll see here is that not only that, it displayed every creature that's ever inhabited the Earth and how they came to be. Another station of these, when they say station, they're referring to these tablets, right, within the chamber here, and these different tables. Another station would allow you to mix the DNA of any two creatures on Earth, then produce a holographic image of what they would look like. This is interesting because you see here, the way in which these tablets are activated seem to be using what we now know to be quantum entanglement, which many, many years ago, we could argue very strongly, was called chaos magic, which we can also substantiate from the whistleblower from the Project Carrot documents. Okay, let me just pull up very quickly the Project Carrot documents, just in case those of you may have forgot what the documents look like. These right over here, the Project Carrot documents. Carrot standing for Commercial Application Research of Extraterrestrial Technologies. So essentially, that's what the Project Carrot documents showed. And the reason I bring this up is because the Project Carrot documents were discussed by two whistleblowers that came out regarding this. Again, I want to say this because it could be disinformation. I'm not saying this as if it's fact, but the consistency, or as I call the data point, is there with respects to the two whistleblowers said, when you put this particular type of language over top a certain type of stone material, they said the language, when under a certain frequency on that particular stone tablet, the language, meaning these symbols here, would move and behave as if they were self-conscious, sovereign, sentient, or self-aware. Does that not remind us, folks, of what's being described over here? It's just a thought. It's just a thought. But you see over here, it seems to be utilizing and harnessing that same type of technology. So let's take a look over here. In 2002, the Pentagon was running several military and geodesic programs using satellites based on the above technology. The satellite spotted a particular structure located inside the Bucegi Mountains. This is allegedly, again, this is just a sketch, obviously, but we'll zoom in here very quickly for anyone that wants to see. This is allegedly what the geodesic programs and satellites were able to detect underneath the SPHINX. So they were like, already the United States was like, what the hell? So anyways, the satellite, hold on, let me zoom in a bit. The satellite scan of the mountain revealed two major energetic blocks. The blocks were made of artificial energy. The first was connected to a wall blocking access to the tunnel. The second was huge, like a dome or hemisphere at the opposite end of the tunnel near the center of the mountain. Massini acknowledged that there is something extremely important and was very well placed. Okay, now what we'll see here, the people from the Pentagon couldn't understand why the tunnel turned in a sort of zigzag pattern towards the central zone of the mountain, nor the significance of the 26-degree angle of the construction. Again, this 26-degree angle we see here, 26 degrees, right? Going this way, and then boom, 26 degrees going the opposite way. Now we'll see here. The structure was in a parallel plane with the ground, and the semi-spherical energetic blockage was situated on the vertical corresponding to the ridge rocks called Babel. Actually, as our measurement based on the Pentagon data showed, the vertical was coming out at approximately 40 meters from Babel, between it and the Bucegi SPHINX. All right, now there is allegedly a similar structure in Iraq. All right, Signora Massini led me to understand that the elements of the internal artificial structure from Bucegi, Romania, would not have particularly attracted their interests had it not been for the fact that their representatives from the Pentagon had noticed that the semi-spherical blockage had exactly the same frequency and shape as one from another secret underground structure that they had discovered just a few months before somewhere near Baghdad. What's interesting too is that a lot of these alleged rooms that are being discovered all over the world, ultimately, folks, I would dare to say, seem to be very close to, if not directly under or on top of, salt mines. Why salt? Because apparently, again, we are a species hit on the head with amnesia, meaning there has been nuclear war here on this planet many hundreds of thousands of years ago. What happens when nuclear bombs are dropped and things like that? It seems as though that when an EMP is put out, the salt is not affected by it, hence why you'd be safe within those salt mines, right? Makes sense. Understandable. Now, what's interesting too, before I go on, is I want to mention the 26 degrees, the way in which these measurements are so precise, almost as if they need to be precise relative to whatever you want to call it, the karma of the universe, the rules of the cosmos, the code of the simulation, whatever you want to call it. So now, here's what we'll find. Shortly after the discovery, the war started, and the Americans, with total secrecy, had access to that area while the Iraqis didn't know a thing about it. Massini said that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't penetrate the energetic wall, but he didn't give me any more details. The whole operation was top secret. He stated that what was there was connected with our planet's mysterious past, but in a certain way with the history of their organization as well. All right. Now, what's interesting here, by the way, folks, is that there's what we're seeing here is a force field that, if we scroll up to get a visual, a force field right over here that prevented the soldiers from getting in. Apparently, these soldiers had to raise their consciousness. Now, the problem with saying something like that is that's quite a vague term, right? That can mean something different to everybody if we're being completely honest with ourselves. However, interesting that this was discovered in 2002, if I'm not mistaken, and then all of a sudden, all we have to do, folks, is a quick search here. When did Romania join NATO? By the way, they were fast-tracked. That's not a conspiracy. That's a legitimate thing. Interesting. Romania-NATO relations in 2004. How convenient. So, again, I'm not saying that is factual with respects to that's why they joined NATO that quickly. I'm just presenting the information with the data points that I see. So let's take a look. Hold on. Here we go. Massini also said, by the way, I just wanted to say, with respects to this, whether it's Saturn moon matrix or this, mind control grid that we're under right now, this is going to connect to that, by the way. But at the same time, I also want to mention, too, that I believe, and I'm hesitant to say that, but I believe this projection room was placed on underneath the Romanian Sphinx long before the Orion Dracos and the Archons began to instill their plan and sort of lay everything out. I mean, 50,000 years ago, assuming that date is even relatively accurate, that's quite significant. But Massini also said that what was there was information about the planet's mysterious past and history of their organization. When the Pentagon investigation noted the similarity of the data between the underground structure near Baghdad and the one from Bucegi, Massini was suddenly very agitated. Initially, they've almost panicked. The panic was due to the fact that this structure, much larger and more complex than the one from Iraq, is on Romania's territory. Keep in mind, it seems that Romania has a very important mission in the years to come. Above the Bucegi Mountains, there's also an energetic pyramid. Its shadow can be seen twice a year, which has a protective purpose and also keeps safe the true knowledge that will be revealed to everyone when the time comes. Massini provided the correct plan to reach the tunnel, as it has been calculated by experts in the Pentagon. The breakthrough was possible close to 60 to 70 meters from the first energy barrier on the side of the mountain. Massini promised ultra-sophisticated U.S. military tech to achieve breakthrough into the first energy barrier. Okay, the first attempts going through the barrier cost the lives of 3 soldiers who had cardiac arrests as they tried to walk through it. You know what this reminds us of, folks? This reminds us, let me see if I have this. I don't believe I do. Please forgive me. This reminds us of that lake within a lake where certain fish, particularly dolphins, are able to go through it because of for some reason, the frequencies they emit, but humans can't. Let's actually, let's do a quick little search. Lake inside of a lake. This is a real thing here. Hold on. Anyways, please forgive me, folks, but anyways, I think some of you know what I'm referring to here. Let's take a look. So the soldiers had cardiac arrest is going through. It was, and I quote, it was a vibration frequency problem, I said, amazed by the calm with which I had spoken those words. Caesar looked at me surprised. Exactly, he confirmed. Looking for a solution, I closed my eyes and focused upon the energetic barrier. I felt that it was actually alive, but this is said in quotes, but I compare this to when Werner von Braun said to Uri Geller many years ago when he brought him to a classified NASA site, he showed him the metal of some of the alien craft and said it's almost like it's breathing, like it's alive. Anyways, shortly I felt that it actually was alive, but in a very special way that I couldn't explain to those present. I felt that between me and the barrier's energy was a certain compatibility, something like a reciprocal sympathy. and that I had successfully passed the personal vibration test. This could have to do with karma, nuclear karma, as we talk about on our Patreon with respects to Dan Winter and phase conjugation. I couldn't stop asking myself what kind of exceptional technological and spiritual development had those who had established this genuine frontier of energetic checking, which present science can't even conceive of, never mind about actually achieving. I then took a few stones from the ground and threw them towards the invisible energetic barrier. As soon as the stones touched the energetic barrier, they were transformed into a fine powder that fell on the ground, forming a straight line. All right, I was now looking at the amazed faces of the American officials and a few members of my team who were still on the other side of the barrier. I went to the wall and pressed the triangle from the perfectly finished stone square, the one you are looking at now. Actually, it was enough just to touch it because it doesn't move. It's fixed. Only its surface is carved in the stone. The gate, from which you now see just a part, immediately started to glide smoothly and almost without any noise until it stopped in the position it is still in. That was the moment when all of us saw for the first time the Great Gallery. It was a moment of intense emotion. We were shocked that it was lit just as you see it now, but without actually containing any light source, at least any conventional light source that we know of. Okay, now this is what gets interesting, because apparently what you have, what page are we on here? We are on page 6. Let's jump to page 14. Okay, the transversal section of the mountain room. There's more than one room. Okay, so what you have here is, again, the energy shield, the hall from the inside of the mountains that includes the projection hall, right over here. We then have the mountain's rock, and then the tunnel of that 26 degrees there. Again, the mathematical measurements seem to be very, very precise. So, let me just jump back to page number 6 here. Hold on. All right. Later, I did more experiments, especially after we precisely marked the area where the energetic barrier acted. General Obadiah came and touched with only one finger the invisible surface of the barrier. And even if nothing serious happened to him, he still had a feeling of vertigo and nausea. The presidential counselor was violently thrown to the ground, even though the contact between his skin and the barrier was very light. He recovered from his experience later under a doctor's supervision. After that, no one else wished to try going through the energetic wall. The 3 soldiers who died probably had a simultaneous contact on a bigger surface of their body that was lethal for them. The problem is that people cannot stay in the invisible barrier for too long. This is the invisible barrier between the closed gate and the energetic wall. Those who can't go through it can't stay there for too long. We tried it with a few soldiers, and after we closed the gate and activated the energetic barrier, they told me that they felt like they were suffocating, and it became more and more acute. We therefore had to leave the energetic barrier as well as the gate open, but as you have already seen, we placed 2 guards and we installed an alarm to prevent, make sure no one gets in. The iris identification system resets itself after 5 seconds, which is enough to cross the entrance line into the gallery and beyond the gate's gliding system. Now, just to give you folks a visual, again, just to give you folks an idea, what you have here is a tunnel that you can walk into from one side, and as you stand here, this is that barrier between the tunnel and the energy shield. So this was the stance, I believe. This was the place in which these soldiers started saying, oh crap, we're feeling sick, basically, right? And then obviously the closer they got, and then touching it was obviously not going to do them any good at all, right? This is the sight from the top of the mountain room, of the mountain room, projection room, whatever you would like to call it. So again, we have the mountain's rock, we have the energy shield. Again, this is that space, that barrier, free space between the rock wall and the energy shield. Right? So very interesting stuff. But let's continue on here. Let's take a look. Hold on a second. All right. Great diplomatic tensions. I got back to the base as fast as I could and entered the Americans' room, where I was also received by General Obadiah. Caesar continued to tell me. An unpredicted element occurred that ruined all plans, ours as well as Signore Massini's. The Romanian press leaked something, I guessed. It was something even worse than that. Do you remember that the vulnerable one told me about the discovery they had made next to Baghdad? That there as well was an energetic barrier that couldn't be breached, but was identical with the semi-spherical shield that surrounded the big hall from here. I nodded. The Americans' discovery was not accidental, but followed certain indications from the same military espionage satellite that also revealed the data for the approximate map of the structure inside the Bucegi Mountains. Caesar continued, quote, well, the American Counselor on National Security issues got an ultra-secret fax in which he was informed that the energetic shield from Baghdad suddenly activated and started pulsating at a great frequency. The amazing information was that a hologram appeared in front of it, gradually showing Europe, then the southeast of Europe, then Romania's territory, then the Bucegi Mountains, and finally the location of the inner structure within the Great Gallery's corridor and the semi-spherical energetic shield that was strongly pulsing. Essentially, folks, what's happening here is that when any one of these individuals tried to approach the energy field and they would touch it, whether it was lightly or very strongly, what would happen is that the energy shield on the other, in Iraq, in Baghdad, would show where the energy shield in Romania is attempted to be penetrated. And it seems like using, again, 3D holograms similar to that same room that was found in the film Prometheus, for those that have seen the movie. These holograms were pinpointing in on the map where this shield was attempted to be breached. What connected them? What was the energy that connected them? Did it have to do with the precise mathematical angles of the structures? I honestly don't know. I'm just, trying to put this out there for the sake of debate and speculation. Now, take a look at this. Let me see. It was obvious that the two energetic semi-spherical shields were directly but mysteriously connected, and that the activation of one of them led to the activation of the other one. Who knows? Maybe there is a network of these kinds of underground structures all over the world. The bad news was that the U.S. presidency was informed of these events and made diplomatic contact with Romania through the secret services. In just a few minutes, not hours, not days, in just a few minutes, the whole operation had been uncovered. The imminent arrival of a state commission from Bucharest had been announced to come and evaluate the situation. You see how quickly they got on top of this? This, from my understanding, was under the Bush administration. I would dare to say Dick Cheney more than anybody else. But again, now, I want to make one more connection before we go on. Leonid Ivashov claimed that NASA had spent $10 or $20 million to look for something within Europe that was only, he wouldn't even say, because he said he would sound like a moron and it would sound like something out of a Disney movie, essentially. It could have been this. It could have been this. So take a look at this. I was so absorbed in listening to what Caesar was telling me that I had not even realized that I had stopped walking. We had about another 100 meters before the last turn in the light room from the energetic shield, reflecting on the Great Gallery's wall, was now much stronger. Did they want to take over at a political level? I impatiently asked. I think this was the initial order, but things got even more complicated when they actually saw what this was all about. My fears came true because our politicians, the ones that had the right to be made aware of these aspects, panicked. It was obvious they couldn't face the events and that the decisions were going to be made under an advanced state of stress. All right, take a look at this. General Obadiah was called to Bucharest. It was a critical moment which put at stake even the existence of Department Zero, or at least of its independent structure. The general had to justify the eluding of the political power. Before leaving for the capital, accompanied by those from the commission, General Obadiah talked with me, and we both decided to reveal all the aspects, intrigues, and plans of the last year, including my relation with Signore Massini. The most difficult problem was to find exactly the right people to make that crucial, important report to, because otherwise all our intentions and plans would be revealed. Again, essentially what they're saying is the Americans basically in almost every way, shape, and form, whether through intelligence or otherwise, had whatever you want to call it, moles, informants on the inside with respects to, finding out what's going on in any country in Europe, right? Again, as we see here, the National Defense Supreme Council asked for an emergency meeting, right? Most were shaken by what what they found out. So we have, again, all of these different meetings, all of these different politicians asking what's the case, and then of course there's the politics of it and all of that. But what I did want to jump to was this right over here. Finally, after 2 hours of discussion and consultation, a final collaboration agreement was reached with precise terms that balanced the interests of both countries. The Pope promised to make certain documents available to the Romanian state from the ancient papal secret archives, which are of great importance for Romania, and also evidence supporting the discovery in the mountains. All right, now, after 24 hours of talks, again, this happens quick, within a day, that's fast. Usually talks take months, if not years. A final agreement occurred between the Romania, the Vatican, and the USA, and they chose to cooperate under precise terms, which included the US fast-tracking Romania into NATO. The Romanian state was to postpone the disclosure for now. The Pope had to be involved. unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, because the Pope essentially was in a situation where he had access to all of this. We have to understand that the Vatican has access to all of this knowledge. Maybe not all of the literal mechanisms or apparatuses or devices or equipment, but ultimately they have knowledge. And it seems like, again, going back to the episode we did, please forgive me, with Dr. I forgot his name, Anyways, about Sister Lucy and the Fatima sisters there, we see the realignment of a horizontal restructuring between church, state, and private enterprise, particularly within the mid-1950s. We also have to remember the Orion Draco signed a deal with Eisenhower's administration in the mid-1950s, allegedly. Now, what's interesting about this, even more worrisome than a human angle, is a possibility that there could actually be, again, these shape-shifting, whatever we want to call them, Orion Draco beings or anything like this within the U.S. government. So again, who are you going to tell? Who do you trust if some of them may in fact be aliens? And to cite former, I believe it was Robert Reed, if I'm not mistaken, former Cosmic NATO top secret clearance, he said one of the biggest concerns was that these shape-shifting beings could be anywhere in the White House and the Pentagon, and they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Right now, take a look at this. And I quote, "The energy shield's role is to divide the room, like a wall, from the rest of the cavity in the mountain, and also to protect from exterior bad influences." All right, said Caesar, making me return from my thoughts. "It has only one way of unconditioned access, like a door right in front of you." All right. Indeed, as soon as I got closer to the energy wall, the part of the shield that was limited by the two borders became transparent and then disappeared completely, thus precisely marking the contour of an entrance of almost 5 meters high. I stepped inside the big room, followed by Caesar. All right, now take a look at this right over here. In that heavy rock wall of 10 or 12 meters high, I saw a display of 3 huge tunnel entrances, one right in front and the other 2 symmetrically on each side. They were vaguely lit by a green light. From that distance, I could not clearly notice the details, although I saw other devices were around each of the 3 tunnels. Still, I noticed each of the tunnels was guarded by 2 soldiers, like at the entrance in the big gallery. Puzzled, I turned towards Caesar. All right. And I asked, "Do you install in security systems here too? Why? Where do these tunnels go?" Caesar replied, "This is the area to which you do not have access. It is strictly forbidden through the secret protocol signed between the U.S. and the Romanian state. I can give you some general information about this, but certain things should remain secret, at least for some time from now. Let's start from here," Caesar said, pointing somewhere at my right. I turned and saw a line of huge T-shaped tables made of stone and lined up against the wall, following its curve. None of these tables were shorter than 2 meters high. Now, before I go on, see this right here at the top? The energy shield's role is to divide the room, like a wall, from the rest of the cavity in the mountain, and also to protect from exterior bad influences. Again, to divide the room. Not only is this energy shield being layered, whether the creators that did this relative to, 50,000 years ago when it was built did this on purpose or not, which I'm sure they did, but at the same time, notice something. Every single time we come across these investigations and these analysis of, Akashic records and, Walter Russell Universal and all these different discoveries, it comes down to polarity, duality, plus, minus, positive, negative. By definition, one cannot be defined without the other. So why is it, again, maybe a coincidence, maybe not. I'm not saying it's fact. You folks can please decide for yourselves, and I genuinely mean that. The energy shield's role is to divide the room. Again, seeming like there's some type of universal constant or rule within the simulation that we live in, whatever you want to call it, that seems to require some type of division, because by definition, there's no way to know one without the other. How do you know darkness without light? You see what I'm saying? It gets quite philosophical, if I'm being honest. But again, now, let's continue down here. Okay, I turned and saw a line of huge T-shaped tables. Different signs of an unknown writing that looked like ancient arrow-headed characters were cut 3-dimensionally into the thickness of the tabletop. There was also one such line of signs on each table's width. There were 5 tables on each side of the room. They looked like technical tools for scientific use. Several white translucent wires descended from many of them, gathering in rectangular boxes situated outside the table and on the ground. The boxes were made of a shiny silver metal that cannot be scratched. This seems to be similar, by the way, folks, with the boxes that allegedly these aliens use when they extract the souls from when these malevolent beings extract the souls from the body during abduction cases. It might not be, but it could very well be. It's hard to say. Now, before I go on, I do want to mention something else too. In the title of the stream, of course, we have here Akashic structures, right? And the second part, or the last part of Gray's being human-ish, we'll cover near the end. But ultimately, folks, the point I'm trying to make here essentially is that what we're seeing is when we go back, please forgive me 1 second, to the image here of Tunnel 1 going to Inner Earth or Agartha, right? I'll zoom this in. Tunnel 2 going to Egypt, Tunnel 3 going to Tibet. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Nazis had an arrangement with the Tibetans, as does America right now, relative to the Antarctic Treaty and all of that. But the point is, you see how they're tunnels? This is when it gets hard to explain in a way. As I was just saying about as above, so below, you don't know light without darkness because by definition, you don't know what the other is without knowing something to give it relativity to, right? These tunnels may not be tunnels. They may in fact be, yes, stargates, portals, but it's hard to explain. Something that we cannot comprehend, not just because of the mind control grid that we're under, but put that aside for a second, okay? Our mind is sort of like, it is a computer, but what happens is that if we live in what Jacques Vallée has referred to as an information structure, okay, energy, esotericism, information structures seem to be what makes all of this up, and we can prove that because if we go to Dr. Eric, or at least provide evidence for it, if we go to Dr. Eric Davis's teleportation physics study in 2004, we'll see here that it all has to do with dematerializing and then rematerializing photons. And energy and information, we are information, hence quantum entanglement, hence chaos magic. So, if we jump back to right over here, what's happening is there is some type of energy structure that our minds perceive as tunnels because the structure in and of itself cannot be translated into our brains because we have nothing to relate it to or to even visualize it as. Very simple example. Try explaining to your child or a young child who's never seen, let's just say, I don't know, the ocean or a big body of water, what it looks like. How do you explain it to them? It's blue. Okay. But then after that, how do you do it? They gotta see it. They gotta maybe swim in it. They have to touch it themselves to get it. Same concept here. You guys see what I'm saying? So what happens is that the information structure, think of like the Matrix movie, code, is interpreted through the light spectrum that we can conceive of or perceive of because of how suppressed our minds have been, to then translate it in our minds and process it in a way that we understand, and our eyes do the visual work of presenting it as a stargate or a tunnel or something like this. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? I hope that does. Right. Star for protect, that whole thing, like Wakanda. I mean, again, as they say, you know, as a lot of people would say, it's right in front of our faces, generally speaking. So, let's take a look here. All right, here we are. The room would have 3 doors, right? The Giza Sphinx, one to Tibet, one to Inner Earth, right? Here would be a 3D drawing or sketch of the room, right? You have the niches with the crystal plates. Hold on, let me... There we go. You have the niches with the crystal plates. You then have this special chair where you put that helmet on, and then you can see you would leave your physical body, and you would be self-aware that you are now in the astral realm. To what extent the realm in which you're in is with respects to densification, I don't know. And then you can then access almost any and every event. Again, to call it the projection room, in my humble opinion, would be a little bit of a disservice, mainly because I think at the end of the day, it's so much more than that, ultimately, right? So now, here's what we'll find. Hold on a second. Here we go. All right. Because the tables were tall, I could not see where the source of the hologram projections was. I found out from Caesar that the rectangular surface of the smooth stone tables had a tight opening in the middle that was several centimeters long and parallel to the longest side of the table. The holographic projections appeared from there. The technology used was great, said Caesar. The projections appear by themselves, but at the same time, they are interactive and depend on the one who watches them and touches the surface of the table. The reason I'm emphasizing this, folks, okay, is because that is identical to what both whistleblowers said in 2007 with respects to the Project Carrot language, with respects to this stone or this tablet, that when the language was placed onto this type of stone tablet and then it was done within a certain frequency over top the tablet, these languages would act as if they were self-aware of each other and relied on one another with respects to understanding its objective. And when I say objective, like the language would move on its own as if it knew what to do. Sort of like Venom, Black Goo, Transformer, Transformium, that whole thing where it can sort of, think for itself, so to speak. Now, I went to a table that had some 3-legged steps brought by the base teams, and I went up a couple of steps until my body was above the table. It was almost 5 meters long and 1.5 meters wide. It was covered by a film made of a glass-like material, which was not transparent but dark. I could see my head and my body reflecting as in a mirror on the surface of that shiny, dark, and blue, smoky film. Alright, now take a look at this. The film was split into several big squares and marked by straight and horizontal vertical lines, yada yada. The rays that formed the hologram went out the central slot in a perfectly coherent beam. Alright, now take a look at this. Apparently, its domain was biology, as images of plants and animals scrolled in front of my eyes, some of them being totally unknown to me. I slightly touched one of the squares, which was the biggest, and the hologram began presenting the anatomical structure of the human body. Actually, I soon realized it was my body because of a certain mark I had on my arm. Although I was not moving, I saw the holographic images of certain areas of my body spinning continuously and being presented from different angles. If I lifted the finger off that square, the images of plants and animals would reappear. If I moved the finger inside the square, the image would read the inside of my body, thus offering the projection of my internal organs according to my finger's position on the surface from the square. I noticed that moving the finger in a certain way magnified the examined area. This seems to describe not just what we see in the film Prometheus, folks, but also in Man of Steel from 2012, I believe, or 2013, with Henry Cavill, Russell Crowe, directed by Zack Snyder. That ship that Superman, Kal-El, was sent to Earth with, that had his father, Russell Crowe's consciousness stored in it. That whole angle of, remember, pressing the stone in and all that stuff to activate all that, seems to be similar in this regard too. Again, drop feeding, it's hard to say. Now, because this room was allegedly established 50,000 years ago, it's possible this could have been a room for a very advanced species. Hard to say that whenever they would come to Earth. Clearly, obviously, it wasn't a pit stop type room or a system, because there were locations connecting all over the planet, but it could have been a multi-purposeful type network all over the globe, really. A healing place, a place for scientific research, a place for, again, for you want to travel somewhere with respects to maps, assuming they would use location and geography the same way that we do. Anyways, so excuse me 1 second. Here we go. I touched the other squares. Each time I touched one, the square lit in orange and signs of the unknown writing appeared inside of it. Now, this is where it might get interesting to substantiate the human hybrid theory. Fascinated, I went over several squares, watching the incredible projections of life on other celestial bodies. Alright, I noticed that if I simultaneously touched two surfaces of two different squares, the holographic image would render a very complex scientific analysis, presenting the DNA molecules of those beings and the compatible possibilities between them. Do you see this, folks? And if it's accurate with respects to this room being established 50,000 years ago, and humans, again, depending if you want to believe him or not, Lou Elizondo, with respects to when he had that soliloquy on Kurt Jaimungal's theory of everything, when he said, imagine something happened to the human species roughly 70,000 years ago. Again, that's 70,000 time frame. 70,000 years ago and 13,000 years ago from at least today, modern day. See, those 2 points in time seem to be quite significant. It seems like our DNA was altered 70,000 years ago, and then our species was wiped out and given amnesia 13,000 years ago. I'm not saying this is fact, again, but let's take a look here. By the way, the reason I bring this up is because could it be that these beings using the projection room, maybe more than one type of being or faction, if you will, were the ones that maybe hybridized humans? And this was why, again, they had these rooms that if they wanted to, mingle with different DNA of different species, these tablets would show the possible outcomes, possible successful outcomes. Possible. The images were accompanied by sideways vertical lines of that strange writing, which were probably observations, comments, or indications regarding the analysis made. Vertical lines of that strange writing. What strange writing? It seems to be describing this language right here, which is also the same type of language and symbolism seen on ET beds or stretchers. And when I say that, I'm talking about alleged leaked images from the deep underground military bases where you see this exact same type of identical language sprawled across the sides of the stretchers of which these beings are lying on. I have a few images that have alleged, yet to be debunked, but I'd be more than glad to admit that they're BS if anyone could, point out the falsification of them. So let's see here. These were dynamic and presented in a series as the possible phases of mixing the two life forms. In the end, the most probable mutant form appeared as a combination of genetic data. I went down the stairs shaking. My mind refused to think coherently. Strange thoughts appeared in my mind, like I was being set up or everything was a dream. Realizing what was happening to me, Caesar gradually clamped down on my paranoid tendencies that had been triggered by the very strong shock I had felt as a result of the advanced tech I had accessed in such a very short period of time. After a couple of minutes, I recovered. "You can spend years here without getting bored," I exclaimed. "I almost cannot believe they reached such an advanced technological level. Who were they?" "You must know." When Caesar answered, he was very serious. "No matter how weird it would seem to you, we have had no clue up to this moment. It is as if they wanted to leave us this invaluable treasure, but did not want us to know who they were. The only aspect we can suspect is that they were probably very tall. We cannot otherwise explain the gigantic dimensions of some objects in here. You can be proud, though, that you have been the first to thoroughly investigate the, quote, biology table for the last 50,000 years. Now, again, we see here, could this be the Anunnaki? Again, I'm genuinely asking because it's hard to say, right? See, the instruction is that they do not touch or move anything when they were alone. There's so much here, right? Again, for example, I continued my rapid investigations over each table. There were projections from physics, cosmology, astronomy, architecture, technology, religion, and a domain representing the characteristics of several races of intelligent beings that did not look entirely human. I quickly understood the information was so vast that many groups of researchers needed several years to study it continuously without fear of finishing it. That's how much information there allegedly was or is in there, folks. Everything seemed to be a great library of the universe, brilliantly synthesized by an enigmatic civilization that was extremely advanced technically and spiritually. Again, library of the universe or of Earth? A lot of people say this is what you would call the Akashic Records database of Earth. Not saying that this Romanian Sphinx is the exclusive location, but again, of course, in general, that there would be a handful of locations. All right. "We have come to the conclusion that this represents a mental emission installation," said Caesar, "a possible thought amplifier or true mind machine. It is clearly structured according to the dimensions of the builders. The metal sensors you see higher up would fit perfectly on the head of a 3.5-meter high man that sits down on the platform. Unfortunately, I have not had the possibility of understanding how it works yet. All right, certain adaptations must be made, but several American transport vehicles will be arriving soon that carry the latest tech and teams of specialists who can begin to systematically research the whole place." All right. Excuse me one second. Here we go. "Do you know the purpose they used it for?" I asked with great interest. "I think it was very important since it is in the middle of the room. It is true, but we cannot know its true use yet. It is likely that the person who connected to these sensors inside of the cylinder was capable of controlling great mental energies and conducting them correspondingly, but it is impossible for me to be sure of the target of those energies for now." All right. Let me see. Hold on one second. Let's take a look at this right over here. We'll pull up the diagram very quickly. Okay, hold on. Here we go. "I have purposefully and obviously omitted certain specific data that can lead to identifying the mountain area where the big discovery was made. A year after my visit to that place, I still vividly recall the overwhelming impressions I had and yada yada." Give me one second, folks. Here we go. "According to what Caesar told me, the third tunnel, the one placed in the middle of the projection room, represents a worldwide secret that the U.S. wanted to keep strictly for itself." All right. Now, again, this is when it gets a little bit interesting because who gave the go-ahead relative to the Americans saying this, that they wanted to keep it for themselves? Was it these alleged, to be honest, Orion Draco reptilians influencing American leaders, human American leaders? Right. So again, it's very difficult to say. Take a look at this. Caesar told me that there are very important persons in our political and administrative system who, quite fortunately, know about the abominable practices of the Masons and are strongly opposed to their influence, especially with regards to taking over the great discovery in the Bucegi Mountains. He then told me that the central tunnel leads towards the interior and even beyond the crust of the earth, but would not give further details. All right? Again, this is when it gets iffy, because I'm not trying to take a jab or take a shot at Freemasons or anything of the sort, but it has been true that there are a lot of individuals that have ideological subscriptions to such mentalities within the government. All right, now we see here from time to time, the holographic projection held the image of the event when an important moment in time was reached. In the background, the map of the sky could be seen and the positions of the main stars and constellations of that time were marked. Caesar explained that the stars proved to be a very simple method of historical determination. All that the savants needed to do was then overlap the positions of those stars on their actual ones and thus ascertain the periods of time when those events actually happened. Again, astrology, cosmology seems to play far more, I guess you could say, significance than we would assume, right? So take a look at this right over here. I honestly confess that, according to my judgment, 90% of what is officially known today on the history of humankind is fake and fabricated. It is truly unbelievable that what is considered to have really happened is mostly a lie. All right. On the other hand, the myths and legends that fill the storybooks considered by most people to be a product of bubbly imagination are almost true in many respects. Now, I'm not saying just because this individual is writing this and, that this is, solidified within fact. But again, over and over and over again, we keep seeing now this regurgitation and this ascension of the terminologies of inversion, perversion, falsified history over and over. Take a look at this. This strange oh my god, he says it right here. This strange inversion has caused many problems and disputes between people throughout time. The majority of archaeologists and researchers' ideas and suppositions are wrong, even though various proofs are sometimes so obvious that they should change their misled opinions. Some of their fantasies, such as the hilarious theory of the dinosaurs' disappearance 65 million years ago, or considering that the old continents of Atlantis and Lemuria are a myth, are now completely shattered, because I saw very clearly then and there how things really happened. But for many researchers, it is probably more comfortable to soundly sleep instead of accepting the challenge of the unknown and admitting their limits. Right? Again, the problem, this is actually, again, a good problem if you want to call it. Take a look at this. Was that the time period covered by the holograms was huge, several hundreds of thousands of years. The Earth's precession cycle of 25,920 years brings the constellations in their relative position to our planet to the same spot at periods of time that are a multiple of 26,000 years each. Again, 26,000 years, and you then have 26 degrees of the way in which we see here the projection room. Give me 1 second. 26 degrees right here. You guys see that? Why the projection room is curated to have an Akashic record resemblance of every 26,000 years, and then you have 26 degrees, 26 degrees. Could be nothing. It could be nothing. But let's continue on. Let's see here. The key was to follow the holographic projection from beginning to end, and then calculate how many Platonic years of approximately 26,000 years each are thus marked out. For example, we could draw the conclusion that the construction in the Bucegi Mountains was built around 50 to 55,000 years ago, because the image of the Great Gallery and of the main room was projected with all the objects inside as we found them, having on the background the position of the constellations towards the Earth. So it seems like, again, not just traditional surface level human, predating methods were used and protocols. Not only that, but it seems that, again, this much more advanced way of doing it relative to the constellations of the stars seemed to confirm and solidify and ascertain the veracity of it in a much more guaranteed way. After that, the image appeared one more time as a guide, representing the passing of two precession periods of the equinoxes. The quote-unquote lessons were easy and yet extremely upsetting due to their content. I saw the truth about the Egyptian civilization and the way the big Egyptian structures were built. Truth that is totally different from the stupidities claimed today by Egyptologists. I wish that he had said how they were built. But anyways, there's a few different aspects, using anti-gravity tech, giants, a bit of all of that maybe. I saw what really happened during the Big Flood, again, the 13,000 years ago, as I said, we got that 70,000 year point, then the 13,000 year point relative to today. 70,000 years ago, 13,000 years ago. We see here, I saw what really happened during the Big Flood, as well as the germs of the human civilization that followed it, and how they later populated Europe, Asia, and Africa. Oh my gosh, when this person says germs, could it be the negative entities, non-human ones, of and how they later populated, unless he actually means literal germs. I have not been allowed to disclose these aspects yet, as they imply realities much too shocking for the mentality, ideas, and knowledge of the contemporary man. Again, it seems to be, stated over and over again that this is exactly what those in the know keep saying. At first, I thought that the holographic projection room would show only the past of humankind, starting from its origins until the moment that the construction in Bucegi was made. I then saw the projections presenting the main historical aspects of the evolution of different races on our planet up to 5th century AD. That meant either that the giants who built the whole structure inside the mountain were good masters of accessing the time cliches, or, and this situation looks more probable due to the huge period of time covered by the holographic projection, they mysteriously updated the source of holographic information. Apparently, the last such update took place around 500 AD. No one knew, however, the reason why the historical information stopped at that time. So it seemed like, again, there was information being fed into these projection rooms relative to the other rooms around the planet. Now, I saw in a dramatic course of images the life of Jesus and his crucifixion, denied by some even nowadays. I have to say that a lot of amazing things happened then, things that are much more astonishing than what the Gospels present. The projections also revealed how many, well, that would explain why Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, relative to the Vatican and all that, is the only public and, canonical, canon, original, writings, if you will, but apparently there's much more than that the Vatican has, right? Which would explain why the Vatican and the Pope had to get involved, as we showed at the beginning of the stream. The projections also revealed what many of the persons who attended the crucifixion of Jesus on the hill, people who were not from that time, but who came there from other historical periods. Those human beings who had the same clothes as the Jewish present there had totally different features, and that was the reason why they were hiding their face under the flow of the clothes. It's okay. Now, I want to very quickly bring this up to you. I think this is very significant, guys, because we have, for example, we have someone like Alex Collier who claims that from the Andromedans' perspective, there was no individual, not one single individual per se, that matches the description of Jesus Christ relative to the King James Bible, the modern one in today's day and age. However, you then have other instances where allegedly the chronovisor was used to see the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and this was such a monumental event relative to the past handful of hundreds of thousands of years on Earth, or Terra, or Gaia as they call it, that other alien species came to check out, literally using time travel tech, the crucifixion of Jesus. It's hard to say. I'm not trying to focus this exclusively on the Christian, religion, anything like that. I'm sure everything ties in, and if it doesn't, we will find the gaps and try to make those data points as we see them. But let's take a look here. The hologram also sequentially presented the lives and spiritual missions of certain exceptional persons who truly proved to possess amazing divine gifts. These persons were from the ancient past. I thus saw the deeds of great spiritual reformers from 18 to 20,000 years ago that we know nothing of. Back then, the social system and the distribution of people on the whole planet was totally different to what we know today. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians should strongly reconsider their ideas and conceptions about those times. There were so many elements that I witnessed, and they were presented in such a compact manner that I surely would require hundreds of pages to give even just an approximate description. That's how intense it was. Still, the holographic projection lasted an hour and a half only. The 2 officers who were protecting the room and the 6 soldiers who were standing at the entrances of the tunnels were all astonished as they watched the images, even if it was not the first time they had watched them. After the hologram disappeared, I remained still staring. All right? Again, this is how significant it is. Now, we've essentially covered here the projection room. We've also covered these Akashic structures. So the question becomes, who put the projection room there? Why was it put there? What were the cases behind? What were the events that led to this room not being updated? After 50,000 years ago, roughly 55,000 years ago. Let's take a look at, excuse me one second, this right over here, trickedbythelight.com. One second. This is in my humble opinion, a very, very good source of reference with respects to the different mind control grids using Saturn, using the moon, using, here we go, using different energies to disguise themselves. So essentially what we're seeing here, folks, is we're seeing right now that nuclear bombs, when they're dropped, essentially lighten the layers of different entities that are not supposed to be within this realm. Okay, get closer to this realm. All right. Now, what's interesting about this is that I've read through the vast majority of what's been written here, but the reason I want to bring this up is because the objects, and I know this might sound a little bit like what David Icke is saying, but I need you guys to please bear with me. Think about a string, for example, vibrating very, very strongly to the point where it vibrates so strongly, so avidly, so quickly that it's not even a string vibrating anymore. It's a totally different color. As a matter of fact, if you then bring different vibratory strings to that initial string, it then becomes an object, because you're vibrating it so quickly. Now, you could be saying, yeah, Dave, no, pardon my English, but no shit, Sherlock, we're vibrating right now. Yes, we are vibrating right now, but what we don't realize, because we've been hit on the head with amnesia relative to what seemed to have happened 13,000 years ago, is suppressing the different vibratory frequencies relative to the light spectrum. And I say this because this is where it's going to get really good. Give me 1 second here, folks. Look at this, stealthskater.com/documents/Burish_24. Now, this has to do with an entity called J-Rod, okay? This particular here was written by Linda Moulton Howe, but I want to focus on the data points, not so much about the anecdotal story in and of itself. Now, before we go on, this story was allegedly, again, depicted, told by Dan Burish. Now, we have a great friend of the show, Jeremy Riss, who created and founded Alien Scientist. I'd like to thank you, brother, for even coming on the show a couple months back as you did. He believes, Mr. Riss believes that Dan Burish, real name Dan Crane, is a fraudster, right? We got to play devil's advocate here, all right? Let's be consistent. So, as we see here, his real name is Dan Crane, all right? Apparently, he was a self-proclaimed Area 51 employee, ex-Navy SEALs, all of this kind of stuff, Area 50, Majestic 12, all of this. Now, Vietnam veteran, these are big claims to make if you're going to be, fraudulent and setting all this stuff up. Now, what we'll find are documents that show that the exact dates and times that Mr. Burish claimed to be interacting with this J-Rod alien, which we'll get to in a second, show him at opposite parts of the country. Okay? We then see these images here of Mr. Burish after he was attacked by this J-Rod alien. Okay? Now, again, we see here at the bottom, our friend Jeremy Riss says, conditions for reevaluation. Sorry that I can't scroll up to show you guys more, but if Dan Crane, or Dan Burish, whatever you want to call him, can provide evidence for his claims, such as proof of his education, etc., but until that, I am 100% convinced he's a total fraud. I am saying this out of respect to Mr. Riss. Jeremy, I am inclined to agree with you. What's interesting, however, though, is I can't help but notice the same methods used against Mr. Burish as used against Phil Schneider and Bob Lazar. All right? Now, here's what's interesting. Bill Uhouse, for those that are on Patreon, it was the last Friday or Saturday, the 7-minute intro of Bill Uhouse, who apparently worked with J-Rod as well, said that he was allowed to come out and speak about certain events that occurred with Mr. Burish and Mr. Crane to sort of get a feel for how the public would react. Bill Uhouse died peacefully and all of that, and he didn't get attacked or anything of the sort, but his claims, again, were consistent with Bob Lazar's, with Staff Sergeant Clifford Stone's, you name it. But that's not even what I'm trying to get at here, guys. I'm trying to get at something much more, I guess you could say, complex and in-depth here, okay? So what we'll see here is, again, the interview, Bill Hamilton, we'll see here, summary of Bill Uhouse's background, right? Bill Hamilton is the interviewer and all of that. Now, what we'll find, okay, where was J-Rod supposed to be based? All right. By the way, J-Rod, for those who don't know, is this entity right over here, right? And I just want to actually show very quickly, J-Rod. This is the same J-Rod that some of you may have seen this image of. This individual here, obviously it's a sketch, but this individual right here is allegedly Dr. Dan Burish, who, again, right over here. So again, I'm not saying that he's real or that he's BS or that his story's real or BS, but again, I want to point out the data points. So here's what we'll find, and this is going to bring everything full circle in my opinion with respects to the cover-up. And take a look at this right over here. The first time I saw the phrase EBIN, or extraterrestrial biological entity, in an alleged government document was in the early 1980s when I was trying to further investigate the non-human link to global animal mutilations. I'm just going to tell you guys straight up, I'm not going to waste the time to read all of this here, but apparently the reason why there's so many cattle mutilations, specifically for the blood of the cattle, or of cows, is, I know this is going to sound crazy, YouTube, please don't take the stream down. Apparently, these greys, certain greys from Zeta Reticuli, not all of them, they eat and they drink, but not in the way like obviously with their mouths or with anything like this. They literally, allegedly, slather the blood of the cows all over their body and their body absorbs it in real time. Apparently that's how they fuel themselves. So again, take that as you will. So here's what we'll find. By the way, they call him J-Rod because we'll find here, J-Rod, I just wanted to say, this is allegedly a leaked image of J-Rod wearing a mask. J-Rod was a part of a human-alien exchange program where humans went to one planet and then J-Rod came to this one. And they called it, the plane, the jet, Colonel J-Rod. And this was the symbol that the J-Rod had drawn. Right? We see here, again, this image may not be real. It's very possible it's not real, but it's yet to be debunked. So, again, take that as you will. Right? Now, let's actually focus in on this. Now, where was J-Rod supposed to be based? Here's what we'll find. This is how we started to learn that J-Rod was a designation for this type of entity, because it turns out there were at least 2 J-Rods, at least 2, maybe more. But the 2 J-Rods were located, one at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the other, as we now know, was located in an environmental sphere inside an installation known as Site S4, all right? Or some call it Sector 4. But it's Site 4 within Papoose Mountain itself, in the general area of Area 51. Did Bill Uhouse describe how close he was to J-Rod when J-Rod was communicating? All I remember is that he was in the same room with him. Did he remember any kind of odor? I don't recall that he mentioned that, no. Did he ever touch J-Rod's skin? I don't recall that he touched him, no. So, before we go on, this J-Rod allegedly had, the black eyes, whatever, but apparently these are, again, coverings of the eyes. Now, let me give you folks a background synopsis, a breakdown of what we just read there. Essentially, Bill Uhouse, all right, this gentleman right over here, let me just show you here very quickly. Bill Uhouse was in a room with 18 other scientists. This gentleman right over here. Again, I'm not going to tell you folks what to think of him, if you think real or not. These are sketches of Mr. Uhouse being in these facilities. Now, he claimed that the craft he worked on were exactly identical to how Bob Lazar described them. Now, in this meeting that Mr. Uhouse had with about 18 other scientists and this J-Rod right over here, which was wearing this in this meeting and was about 3 to 4 feet tall, nothing crazy, Edward Teller was at the head of the table, and at the other end of the table was J-Rod. Okay, now, who is Edward Teller? This is when it gets interesting. By the way, you guys could probably imagine why I've been so excited to do the stream on this. Edward Teller is the father of the hydrogen bomb. Again, the father of the hydrogen bomb, as we see here, right? Wikipedia. Okay, he was born January 15th, 1908, died September 9th, 2003. But hold on a second, folks. Let's take a look at this. MysteriousUniverse.org, The Strange Saga of Edward Teller and Area 51. I'm not going to read the article because we got to get back to this expose here, but ultimately, Edward Teller was hanging out outside of what we now know to be the Los Alamos Neutron Science Center, reading a magazine on Bob Lazar. And guess who happened to bump into Mr. Teller that happened to be in the same part of the building as Mr. Teller, as Edward Teller was reading a magazine article on Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar himself, right? Now, this is what's very interesting, okay? On the day on which the two men met, Lazar sat in on a lecture that Teller gave at Los Alamos. It was not so much Teller's lecture that amazed Lazar, rather it was the fact that when Lazar was hanging around at the entrance of the facility, there was Teller sitting on a wall and reading the very article that the Los Alamos Monitor had written on Lazar, which just happened to be a front page article. All right. So Lazar decided to walk over to Teller and told him who he was, namely the person who profiled in the article because of his jet car achievements. Teller found it all very interesting. The two talked for a while about their respective work, after which Teller headed off inside to deliver his presentation. All right. 6 years later, the paths of Lazar and Teller crossed again. It would lead Lazar into the world of Area 51, UFOs, and aliens, or into a world of disinformation and mind manipulation. Okay, now again, this has to do with the whole thing. I'm not saying that this proves Bob Lazar's story is substantiated, right? But again, here's what's interesting. Take a look at this. When Lazar went public with his story of working on alien spaceships at Area 51, he mentioned the Edward Teller connection. He said, I knew the guy and all that, right? I spoke to him and we met multiple times at these facilities, right? Because if Bob Lazar was bullshitting, what the heck was he doing at these classified facilities? It caused more than a few ripples. It's curious that Teller didn't back, maybe even with a lawsuit. Right? People of these positions, Edward Teller was the head of the Atomic Energy Commission. We're going to get back to that in a second, by the way. It's curious, that Teller didn't back, yes. This scenario makes even more sense because Lazar didn't just keep the Teller story to himself. This would have given Teller even more reason and ammunition to attack Bob Lazar verbally, but more importantly, from a legal perspective too. If Bob Lazar was such a, and again, I'm not trying to defend Lazar, I'm trying to play it down the middle. I know there's a lot of inconsistencies and he has been, to be honest, a shady individual relative to his past. I get that. There was a lot of people that were not happy that, allegedly Bob Lazar left out a lot of things when he went on Joe Rogan with Jeremy Corbell. But this makes the point. Teller did something very different. He did not dispatch a team of high-powered and high-paid attorneys to hammer Lazar into the ground, which he could have. He could have made millions off of him. Now we can argue, okay, what does a guy like that need that kind of money for, especially when you're dealing with aliens? What does money mean? Whatever. But the point is that if you really wanted to, if the United States government wanted to hammer the Bob Lazar story into the ground, would they not use Edward Teller and his associates to sue Bob Lazar if they had never met? But look at this. Edward Teller made a statement that was so careful in its terminology that it almost became laughable. Okay? Take a look at this. In fact, it sounds like the carefully chosen words that a lawyer would advise his or her client to use. It's true. Edward Teller said, and I quote exactly, and I quote, "I probably met him. I might have said to somebody I met him and I liked him after I met him, and if I liked him, but I don't remember him." End quote. That sounds exactly like something a lawyer would tell you to say. That's just my opinion. That sounds like what Prince Andrew was trying to convey on that BBC interview, but he couldn't do successfully. This would have been a successful version of that. You see what I'm saying? I know it's funny, but it's true. I mean, let's be honest here, right? What would happen? It's like saying, I didn't murder somebody, but if I did, I hid the body really, really, really well. Excuse me. Okay, so did you murder someone or you didn't? Well, again, it's that whole concept. You see what I mean? So the point I'm trying to make here, folks, is that we have to factor all these things, all of this in. Okay, now, here's what we'll find as well. If we continue on, scientific meetings led by J. Rod and physicist Edward Teller. All right, apparently Bill Uhouse was in attendance at a conference table with a number of scientists at Los Alamos. All right, at one end of the table was the head of the project, by name, according to Uhouse, was Dr. Edward Teller. At the other end of the table was J. Rod. Now, before I go on, all right, I want to make a point here. This only further substantiates the concept that the Department of Energy, which was, if we look here, when was the Department of Energy, when was it founded officially? Okay, 1977, August 4th, 1977. But the Manhattan Project was in the 40s. So you had those same individuals. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Department of Energy, when it officially went on the books to report to Congress and the White House and all of that, even though it technically still doesn't, had the same individuals that were working on the Manhattan Project. So what I'm trying to say is the Atomic Energy Commission, the same source that allegedly told Annie Jacobsen that the aliens at Roswell, that crashed at Roswell, weren't aliens. They were genetically altered children sent as a psyop by Stalin. Apparently, that was a whole disinformation plot coming from the Atomic Energy Commission. How come anytime someone gets close to the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, or the Atomic Energy Commission when it comes to the UFO topic, they're constantly ran in circles, almost as if, I don't know, someone's getting really close, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is purely based in fact. I'm just saying let's look at the data points across the consistencies of how we can find them. So let's look here. Hold on. meeting with the alien and J-Rod might have been as far back as the 70s or early 80s, but I'm not sure. At this table, in which J-Rod is presiding with Edward Teller, most of us know was the director of the Star Wars program under the Reagan administration, which he was. We've done many live streams where we've done the expose from World War II up until now, and this Star Wars program was right there. Again, allegedly also with the Paul Benowitz, the whole thing. And if this was in the 1970s, this would have been before the public announcement of the Reagan Star Wars program. What was the subject between J-Rod, the conference table of scientists, and Edward Teller? I have no idea. That wasn't disclosed to me. 1 second. I wish I knew, but Bill said it was quite a scene. All right, it would seem that describing a meeting with Edward Teller and scientists and an EBE dressed in a human shirt in the 1970s would certainly be worth going into great detail about. Now, interestingly enough, all right, what we'll find is that when this J-Rod would speak, whenever a scientist would ask it a question, it wouldn't speak with its mouth. It would respond with the voice of the person who's asking it in that person's head. So essentially, pretend you ask me a question verbally. Say, "Hey Dave, what's the color of the sky?" And I respond, "The color of the sky is blue." And I say that back to you. You hear that response in your own head with your own voice. Do you see what I'm saying? Apparently, that's how this J-Rod responded. Okay, now let me see here. This here, okay, folks, is a depiction of the simulator that J-Rod wanted to bring to the Department of Energy and the Atomic Energy Commission to be used to practice to fly into outer space and things like this. And this was what they had the simulator on once they brought it in. They had to apparently wheel it across. They couldn't teleport it or anything. They had to like wheel it across into this building and all that, and essentially and bring it underground. And once they got it going, you then had the console and the different movable platforms and screening covers. Now, apparently there were no windows. It was extremely hard to fly, and essentially what you had to do was truly be in tune with the harmonics of the universe. And I don't even know to what detail or what extent that would be the case in order to do that, but apparently the dimensions of this craft as well were also not able to be adjusted. The mathematical dimensions needed to be exactly as they were, or else the craft would not work. Similar to the Project Carrot language. Similar to, the Bucegi Mountains of the 26 degrees. If you were to change, even at the slightest, the angles of these tunnels during construction, the whole thing just shuts down, doesn't work. You're just looking at stone. No holograms, no nothing. No energy shield because there's no point. Yeah, sure, you got a bed in the middle of the room, a helmet, you got some gateways, some doorways that lead somewhere, but it doesn't work if the mathematics of it is changed. So clearly there's something there, so to speak, that creates that. Now, apparently, this was when the simulator energized, right? What would happen, it would turn on a 65 degrees pitch, right? This is what would happen as well, too, from a front view, if you wanna call it that, right? Let me see here. Again, yes, if you had a question in your mind, it would respond using the voice of the person asking. 1 second here. Here we go. This is when it's okay. This is what I mean about grays are human-ish. Okay, so we see here. He mentioned that J-Rod was originally from the Zeta Reticulum system, Zeta Reticula 1 and 2, the binary system. Yes. Hold on 1 second. Again, Dr. Dan Burish. We'll see here. Changed his last name in 1995 due to family reasons. Again, take that as you will. Give me 1 second, guys. Here we go. J-Rod's trying to alter Earth timeline. All right. According to Dr. Burish, the Ebens are here to try to alter our timelines, our future. Now, folks, I just want to say, by the way, what I'm about to read to you is what I'm being told is what my modern research, like modern current day research, seems to be leading to. Again, this seems to be also what many individuals like Ross Coulthart are saying. At the same time, could be a total disinformation campaign. Let me just be very clear here. But take a look at this. According to Dr. Burish, the Ebens are here to try to alter our timelines, our future. The reason for this is that they, according to him, fantastic as it sounds, they travel in time, so they already know, or they know as a memory, what happened here. There's a coming catastrophe that drastically reduces the population of the Earth and splits the Earth into two populations. And these two populations, isolated from each other, evolve from what we know as Homo sapiens into two different species. Okay, I gotta be careful saying this here because of the YouTube stream. Folks, what if this is, What if this is the, what's happening in the world right now with the beep boop, the division it's causing? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Take a look at this. Now, it could also be, by the way, the beep boop pushing forward the angle of, again, a handful of humans are ascending relative to the cosmos and the growth of the planet, and a handful of humans are not. They're densified. They're stuck, so to speak, spiritually. Are you saying that they know from our past timeline that there have been asteroid and cometary destructions of Earth, and that they have gone into the future and seen another similar destruction? The answer is, what I'm saying is that they evolved in our future according to the doctrine of the convergent timelines. In other words, they come from our future and they have traveled backwards to our past, our current past. They are coming back because they're trying to prevent some sort of catastrophe. They're trying to alter the timeline, yes. Apparently, whatever genetic traits this J-Rod inherited, they're suffering from some kind of defective gene which has caused neural degeneration in their system, or what Dr. Burish calls a peripheral neuropathy. In fact, Dan was given the task of looking into the possibility of genetic reverse engineering to repair the Ebin's degenerate system. Then the question is the implication that if they came into the Homo sapiens future at some point in the far distance, that they're now reaching back into our genetic bloodlines for genetic material that they think might help them in some way? Again, why certain genes of, certain tissues are taken from different humans and animals, all of that. From what I understand, they are an altered form, a new species that branched off of Homo sapiens. And then the question is, so they branched off in what was a catastrophe of what we call our future? Apparently, yes. All right. Did Dan Burish have any idea of what the catastrophe is in the coming future? He cannot specifically say what occurred. However, he places it as happening approximately a decade from now. This conversation, to give you folks some perspective, occurred in 2002. So a decade from now, 2012. Allegedly, the timeline was merged with the other timelines in 2012. Hence, again, we see over here, give me one quick second, CERN LHC, I think it was this one here, Project Rainbow. And we see, look, CERN had an accident, newspunch.com. It created a rainbow universe. All right, again, what does this actually mean? They don't explain. It's very vague. Just, yeah, whatever. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Solid mathematics back it up. But what it is exactly, don't worry about it. That's it. That's exactly how it goes generally. And I know it sounds funny, but that's, so let's take a look here. Let's see here. In that 2012 time period that is supposed to be the end of the Mayan calendar, yes, but it is not rigidly fixed. It could happen any time between now and then, or even a little past that time. I'm not certain whether it is something that is an instant cataclysmic event of some kind. I have no idea. But of course, all of this is subject to, we're going to find out one way or another. If we do have one of these catastrophes, that means they did not succeed in altering the timeline, right? But if it does not occur, we can say either the information was false, which of course skeptics will say instantly, and I understand that, or we can say they did succeed in their program of altering the timelines and averting a catastrophe. I just find it interesting that all of the studies leading up to 2012 of that year specifically revolved around instances and studies of what we see, like, for example, Dr. Eric Davis's teleportation physics study, right? Sorry, let me jump back here. The thing is that there are groups of humans. Who these groups are, I don't know, who survived by going underground. Exactly, in this alleged future catastrophe? Exactly, to shelter themselves from the effects of the catastrophe. All right, J-Rods, a Homo sapiens species from the future, now moved out to Zeta Reticula 1 and 2, Gliese 876c, and Epsilon Orionis. You're saying that these underground evolving species are what became the J-Rods that ended up on Zeta Reticula 1 and 2 and the other systems? The answer is yes. That's according to what Dr. Dan Burish recalls reading in the briefing documents. All right, that's why, and the question is, that's why there would be some common denominator to genetic material on this earth and why it would be valuable to them. Exactly. And that would explain why the Greys are attempting hybridization and gathering genetic material. Okay, now before I go on, I just want to mention something very significant, at least to me personally. This is still separate from the Pleiadians, from the Andromedans, from the, you name it, from the Oranges. There's a being called the Oranges, allegedly. So it's not just that all of these aliens are us, but again, here's what's so ironic. If we take a big picture step look at the universe, in pure theory, anything biological is us and we are them, because we are all made from the cosmos. So ultimately there is some intrinsic connection there. However, in this particular case, these Greys are us in the future, from the future of a certain branch of a certain timeline. So that's why I say in the title, Greys are human-ish. They are us, but they also aren't. It's complicated with respects to, again, the grandfather paradox, and it seems to show that here. So take a look at this. So, one second. J-Rod, sorry, hold on one second. In your mind, are gray beings one and the same as the J-Rod species? J-Rod is at least one species of gray type being, I believe, because of other descriptions that there are other extraterrestrial types as well. So these EBEs that have been identified at Los Alamos and Area 51 and who knows where else, they would be comfortable being here in the sense that whatever they do to help us would be mutually beneficial to them and us in some far-flung future. The answer, exactly. That would explain their motives for what they do. The explanation for why it is kept so secret is, I guess, you just don't want to announce to the world at large that we're headed for some type of future catastrophe. And unless we avert this catastrophe, a large percentage of the population is going to be eradicated. I mean, you just don't want to tell people that. All right? Now, again, we also have to be vigilant to the fact that there's these different timelines, why all of this would be kept secret, but at the same time, these J-Rods may also be telling the truth, but at the same time be deceiving humans too. We also have to understand this, right? Again, speaking of, mutilations and rubbing the blood all over their bodies called, osmosis, right? So again, it depends on how you how you look at it, but what we'll see here, give me one second. This was a drawing by Dan Burrish of J-Rod subtly encircling the microbiologist with his long arms. So essentially what we'll see here is, give me one second. Did I search up? It's okay. Anyways, this one right over here, J-Rod sketch. What we'll see here, folks, is Dan Burrish allegedly went in to go inject J-Rod, and we will see here, give me one second, let me hop back here, that he had to put a hand sign up and this sign, using just what his right hand, meant, I come in peace and I'm about to perform an operation on you. Dan Burrish thought that was foolish, and what ended up happening was J-Rod attacked Dan Burrish and jumped on him. Now, take a look at this right over here. We're talking now in October 2002. All right, this is current relationship between Eben J-Rods and Earth humans. All right, now this is when it's going to get really crazy in my opinion. Do you have the impression that J-Rod is still working with our scientists inside of the Papoose Mountain facility and at Los Alamos and perhaps other locations in this country? No, because in November 1994, EBE-3's visit came to an end. EBE-3 took the assistant J-Rod from Los Alamos and was to take the one from Papoose and return to home planet, now called Gleiss. What happened is that EB-3 left with only one J-Rod, and the one at Papoose Lake was held back for further studies, I guess. Whatever this agreement is, the negotiated agreement is up for renewal, according to Dan, next year. It's renewed every 9 years. Again, the consistency of the Greada Treaty being renewed every 9 years. So EBE-3 is due to return next year to renegotiate the contract or agreement. But since the J-Rod was left here for further study and considers himself captive and not free to come and go, I am just wondering what will happen when EBE-3 does return. Now, there are a few of these that are working with our secret government here, and the rest go about their own business. They don't even cooperate with our government. This is the part I wanted to point out, folks. So, look at this. Meaning, from your knowledge that there are other extraterrestrial entities that are not at all involved with the J-Rod Eben effort to adjust timelines and to avert some annihilation in the future and save ourselves and themselves. Right? So basically, there's other species on this planet, but what are they doing when they're here? According to this individual here, the other species, are going on their own agendas, even if they are among the J-Rods themselves. What I'm saying is, the greater population of these J-Rod entities do not or does not associate or cooperate with our government. Perhaps it is for this reason that our government is worried about what they may do. What their plan is, because we're not intimately associated with them. We can't control them. I can just say that I don't know what the political organization is that these J-Rods have, what the nature of it, or how they negotiate these agreements, or why there are those who do not agree. All of these are big question marks. I mean, folks, at this point, I can understand why the government would not want to reveal this, because these aliens are coming and going as they please. A few of them are cooperating with the government officially, and even then you got to question if they're lying, and even then if they're so advanced, are they playing mind games on you? And then on top of all of that, you have these other species, and even some of the same species, coming and going on the planet that your government satellites can track very effectively and accurately, but they're not cooperating with the human government, but they're so much more powerful than you. What the hell are you going to do? essentially. So again, I say this carefully, but I understand to a very limited extent why, again, the governments wouldn't say anything. However, I do believe it is, in my opinion, the right of the people to know and deal with it, regardless if it causes mass panic or not. But again, whatever. Again, it's all said and done, so to speak. But again, what we're finding here, folks, is that over and over and over again, the consistencies about the different timelines of these individuals, the different timelines of these beings, the different species, what they're doing, why they're doing, we don't know. Could it be that, for example, certain J-Rods are agreeing to work with, human world governments, and then other J-Rods are being sent by the Orion group, which are being sent by the, please forgive me, the Alpha Draconians, or the Dracos, then the Alpha Draconians above them, to go and essentially go about their business and say, listen, we're going to distract the world governments by sending a few of them and keeping their interest there. We're going to, drop feed them the smallest amount of tech that is extremely old to us. It's not even funny. The question also becomes, what is this event that was allegedly altered, so to speak? Are we on borrowed time yet again? Has this, again, these are the questions that we have to look for with respects to not exclusive documents, but the consistency seems to be there. Let me see here very quickly. Oh, nice. I see. Hold on. Oh, great. Oh, sorry, guys, that I see everyone here chatting and I didn't respond, just because I wanted to explain this to the best of my ability without losing my train of thought. Again, we have the Majestic 12, the Committee of the Majority. There's a difference, all these different things. The head of the NSA, some people are in on it, some people are not. So there's so many different things here, guys. So many different species and intentions that it gets confusing just to even comprehend in certain regards here, right? But we see, Dr. Dan Burrish, PhD microbiologist working in Las Vegas, Nevada in the 90s, photographed by B.J. Wolf, October 5th, 2002, Las Vegas, Nevada. Again, it's a very interesting and intriguing story with just enough individuals, just enough evidence to go, wait a minute, even if this is not entirely accurate, what's happening and what's going on here, right? So I wanted to thank you guys so much. I do have a couple other obligations with respects to the show. The main purpose of all of this was to essentially break this down for you all. Unfortunately, again, it being middle of the week, I didn't really plan for it to be a more long-form stream. I do plan to do a stream this weekend. I'm not sure Friday, Saturday, or Sunday evening, but we'll cover something brand new that I have in the works. And in addition to that, we'll wrap it up by listening to an interview with someone, just like we did last time with Alex Collier, and we'll play some video games and have some fun. So, with that being said, thank you so very much, everyone, and we'll catch you all next time around. Thank you, guys.